Welcome back to this program. Now, one is the largest developing country in the world. The other is the biggest emerging economy in the Western Hemisphere. One is a leading exporter of manufacturers. Another is a global power in agriculture and natural resources. Today, China and Brazil are amongst the major powerhouses in world economic growth. Their relationship not only influences the welfare of their peoples, but also impacts the rest of the globe. As these two countries mark 35 years in diplomatic ties, they're exploring new ways to take their relationship even further.
A 21-gun welcome for the Brazilian president. It's Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's second state visit to China since taking office in 2003. And it's his second meeting with President Hu Jintao this year. Good news came ahead of the visit. Despite the global downturn, economic and trade ties between China and Brazil have been on the rise.
As President Hu Jintao knows, in the first 4 months of this year, China has become the top trading partner of Brazil.
From 2006 to 2008, China-Brazil trade surged at an average annual growth of 50%. Brazilian statistics show exports to China in March were over $1.7 billion, a 134% leap from a year earlier. The figures are encouraging, but given the world recession, that's not the whole picture. Chinese data shows the total import-export volume in the first 4 months was just under $600 billion, down nearly a quarter from a year earlier. Statistics from Brazil also showed the trade volume of the largest South American economy declined by a fifth from the previous year to just over $80 billion.
As two emerging economies, China and Brazil have different degrees of foreign trade dependence for their economic development. China's ratio of foreign trade to the gross domestic product is 66%, and Brazil's is 20%. The ongoing global financial crisis has inflicted enormous pressure on the exports and imports of both countries.
Analysts say one great strength in Sino-Brazilian ties is complementary economies. Soybeans are one of Brazil's major export products. For the past year, the world soybean prices have been falling dramatically. But China increased soybean imports from Brazil, which stood at a 105% growth year on year.
What China imports from Brazil are mainly some resource products, ranging from iron ore to soybean. China's voracious appetite for raw materials and Brazil's capacity to supply them means the two economies are made for one another.
And the two countries are determined to make a good thing better. On Tuesday, they signed 13 cooperative agreements covering issues from equipment to agricultural products, from financing to science.
One is a loan of $10 billion for 10 years to Petrobras to finance our corporate needs. These $10 billion, those $10 billion are going to be used in our strategic plan that has a capex of $174.4 billion from now to 2013.
Since 2000, the GDP of China and Brazil, with other emerging economies, has been growing at a rate more than double that of the developed world. Since 2006, their collective GDP represents over 50% of the world's subscriber growth.
In the 21st century, trade among developing countries is growing most rapidly. And in terms of investment, the capital flow among emerging economies is also increasing. Economic progress of these economies exerts influence on their consumption and investment, which will bring forth cooperation in other fields. In addition, the changing dynamic will be an opportunity for a change of today's international system.
In March, China's central bank governor, Zhou Xiaochuan, called on the International Monetary Fund to create a new super-sovereign reserve currency. Though the IMF gave no response, Brazil's president supported the idea.
This is a moment to come forward with proposals with the aim to make substantial changes in the world financial architecture.
Lula once criticized the white and blue-eyed people who fomented the current crisis. Now, the U.S. has kicked its printing machines into high gear to back its bailouts. But economists fear this could set off a second financial tsunami in the developing world.
The U.S. national debt is too high and the federal government pumps too much money in the bailouts. These two factors might generate the devaluation of the U.S. dollar. To the developing countries, that means, first, their currency is appreciating, which will knock down their trade competitiveness. And second, the value of the U.S. national bonds held by these countries decreases, and they lose the creditors' rights to America.
As a counteraction, many developing nations are signing bilateral agreements to conduct trade through their national currencies instead of using the U.S. dollar as an intermediary. Last August, Brazil and Argentina began using their local currency payment system. During his visit to Beijing, President Lula proposed a similar mechanism.
Brazil is the main trade partner and investment partner of China in South America, and China is the main trade partner of Brazil comparing the whole world. I think it's a very important issue. I think this would speed up the trade relations between Brazil and China, would speed up the relations in terms of investment between Brazil and China. So I see with that proposal a win-win game.
During their Tuesday meeting, Hu Jintao and Lula da Silva decided to start to formulate a joint action plan. The plan will lay a new foundation for expanded cooperation over the next 5 years. Their cooperation is building their own economic clout, and it will enhance the status of developing nations in talks with the developed world.
Well, this year marks the 35th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Brazil. As these two countries mark their past achievements, they're also focusing on the challenges of taking their leaders to a high level. Their pursuit is not limited to the benefit of their own countries. It's a shared responsibility to help bring about fundamental reforms in global governance.